The sack shouldn't have moved. Jake Thornton had been riding fence line for 3 hours under the merciless Arizona sun when he spotted it. A burlap bundle half buried in the wash, where yesterday's flash flood had carved new scars into the earth. At first glance, it looked like debris, feed sack maybe, or someone's lost supplies. But then it shifted. Jake's gelding snorted and sidestepped as Jake dismounted, his boots crunching on sun-baked clay. The silence out here was absolute. No wind, no birds, just the kind of emptiness that made a man's ears ring. He approached the sack slowly, the way he'd approach a rattler coiled in shade. When he knelt and pulled back the coarse fabric, his breath caught in his throat. A baby, maybe 8 months old, with dirt-streaked cheeks and eyes so blue they looked like pieces of sky. The child blinked up at him, and in a voice barely above a whisper, said the word that would haunt Jake for the rest of his days. Mama. Jake's hands trembled as he lifted the child. A girl, he realized, wrapped in what had once been a white dress, but was now stained with mud and something darker. She was light as a sparrow, too light, her tiny fingers immediately clutching his shirt with desperate strength. He scanned the horizon. Nothing. No tracks, no signs of a wagon or riders. Just endless scrubland stretching toward mountains that shimmered like mirages. Whoever had left her here was long gone, and they'd meant for her to stay lost. The baby made a soft sound, not crying, just a quiet whimper that cut through Jake like a blade. In her small fist, she clutched something, a locket, tarnished silver catching the light. Jake tried to pry it loose, but her grip was iron strong, the way only desperate things could hold on. Easy, little one, he murmured, his voice rusty from disuse. He'd been alone on this ranch for 2 years, ever since Sarah died, hardened. He'd spoken to another soul in weeks. The baby's eyes never left his face, and Jake felt something shift inside his chest. A door he'd nailed shut cracking open despite himself. This child had been thrown away like garbage, left to die under the desert sun. But she was alive, against all odds, impossibly alive. As he carried her toward his horse, Jake caught movement on the distant ridge. Riders, 3 of them, dark shapes against the burning sky, too far to make out faces, but close enough to mean trouble. They sat motionless for a long moment, watching, before disappearing over the crest. Jake's blood chilled. Someone was looking for this baby, and they'd just seen him find her. By the time Jake reached his homestead, the baby had fallen asleep against his chest, her breathing steady but shallow. His ranch house squatted in the valley like a weathered gravestone. 2 rooms, a covered porch, and memories of Sarah everywhere he looked. Inside, he laid the child on Sarah's old quilt, the one with the star pattern she'd sewn during their first winter together. The baby stirred, her eyes opening with that same heartbreaking whisper, Mama. Jake's throat tightened. This child was looking for someone who wasn't coming back, just like he was. He heated milk from his one remaining cow, testing it on his wrist the way he had seen Sarah do with orphaned calves. The baby drank hungrily, tiny hands wrapping around his finger with surprising strength. As she fed, Jake examined the locket she refused to release. Ornate engravings covered its surface, but he couldn't make them out in the lamplight. A knock at the door shattered the quiet. Jake's hand moved instinctively to his Colt. Nobody knocked out here. Nobody visited, period. Thornton, the voice was gravelly, unfamiliar. We know you're in there. Jake peered through the gap in the curtains. 3 men sat their horses in his yard, faces hidden by hat brims and evening shadows. The one who had spoken wore a tin star, some kind of lawman, though Jake didn't recognize the badge. We're tracking a kidnapped child, the man continued. Infant girl, taken from a family in Tucson. You seen anything unusual today? Jake's blood ran cold. The baby made a soft sound, and he quickly covered her with the quilt's edge. Real reward for information, another rider called. $500, no questions asked. $500. More money than Jake had seen in 2 years of scratching out a living on dead land. Enough to leave this place, start over somewhere Sarah's ghost didn't live in every corner. But as he looked down at the sleeping child, something twisted in his gut. Kidnapped? This baby had been left to die in the desert, wrapped in rags and buried in a wash. If these men were her family, why hadn't they been searching the wilderness instead of riding fence lines with badges and rewards? Haven't seen nothing, Jake called back, his voice steady despite his racing heart. Silence stretched like a held breath. Then, mind if we search your place? Just to be thorough. Jake's hand tightened on his gun. I mind plenty. This is private property. Wouldn't want to get the wrong idea, Thornton, the lawman said, and there was ice in his voice now. We're trying to reunite a child with her loving family. The baby stirred in her sleep, and Jake saw bruises on her tiny wrists, finger marks, too small and precise to be accidents. Whatever family these men represented, love had nothing to do with it. Come back with a proper warrant, Jake said. Until then, get off my land. The riders sat motionless for another long moment before wheeling their horses around. As they rode away, the leader called back, "We'll be watching, Thornton. That child belongs to people with long reach and short patience." Dust settled in their wake like a judgment. Jake had just made the most dangerous decision of his life, and he wasn't even sure why. The attack came at dawn. Jake woke to the acrid smell of smoke and his geldings panicked whinnying from the barn. Through the window, orange light danced against the walls, fire spreading fast through the dry grass behind his house. The baby was crying now, a thin wail that cut through the morning air. Jake scooped her up, grabbing his rifle and the few supplies he could carry. Outside, flames licked at the corral fence while black smoke billowed across the yard. They weren't trying to kill him, not yet. This was a message: give up the child or lose everything. Jake ran for the root cellar, the one place the fire couldn't reach. He'd barely pulled the heavy door shut when hoofbeats thundered overhead. Through a crack in the wood, he watched Boots pace back and forth above his hiding place. "Stubborn fool's gone to ground," a voice muttered. "Should have taken our generous offer." "Boss wants the girl alive," another replied. "Can't have her talking when she gets older." Jake's blood chilled. The baby pressed against his chest, no longer crying, but watching him with those impossibly blue eyes, as if she understood the danger they faced. "Burn the rest," the first voice commanded. "Flush him out." The Boots moved away, and Jake heard the crash of breaking glass, the whoosh of flames taking hold. His home, everything he and Sarah had built, was dying above his head, but it was the baby's soft whimper that nearly broke his resolve. He could end this, step outside, hand her over, take the money, and ride away. The men might even let him live. But those bruises on her wrists told a different Ori, and the way she'd whispered "Mama" with such desperate hope. She wasn't looking for the people who had hurt her. She was looking for someone to save her. Hours passed before the voices faded and the hoofbeats grew distant. Jake waited until the sun was high before emerging into a landscape of ash and ruin. His house was gone, reduced to smoking timber and twisted metal. The barn stood like a blackened skeleton, and his few remaining cattle lay dead in the pasture. They'd left him alive as a courtesy and a warning. Next time, they wouldn't be so generous. The baby had fallen asleep in his arms, her small fist still clutching that mysterious locket. Jake examined it more closely in the harsh daylight, and finally made out the engraving. A family crest, ornate and expensive. Below it, barely visible, were initials: E.M. Elizabeth Morrison. Jake's breath caught. He knew that name. Everyone in the territory did. Senator Morrison's wife had died in childbirth 3 months ago, and the child had supposedly died with her. But if this baby was Elizabeth Morrison, then the men hunting her weren't lawmen at all. They were murderers, sent to finish a job they'd botched months ago. And Jake Thornton, failed rancher and grieving widower, was the only thing standing between them and an innocent child who called him Mama because she had no one else left in the world. The wind shifted, carrying the smell of distant riders. They were coming back, and this time they wouldn't leave witnesses. Jake rode hard toward the only sanctuary he knew, the abandoned mission 20 miles north, where Father Miguel still tended a flock of one. The old priest had baptized Sarah, buried her when the fever took hold, and never asked questions that didn't need answering. The baby had been quiet during the ride, but as they approached the crumbling adobe walls, she stirred and spoke that word again, Mama. This time, Jake understood. She wasn't calling for her mother. She was calling him by the only name that meant safety, protection, love. The realization hit him like a physical blow. Father Miguel emerged from the chapel as Jake dismounted, his weathered face creasing with concern at the sight of the ash-covered man and the child in his arms. "My son, what has happened?" Jake told him everything: the desert, the fire, the riders with their false badges and true intentions. The priest listened without interruption, his dark eyes growing troubled as the story unfolded. "Show me the locket," Miguel said quietly. Jake pried it gently from the baby's fingers for the first time. Inside was a miniature portrait, A woman with the same blue eyes as the child, her face soft with maternal love. On the opposite side, an inscription, "To my beloved daughter, with all my heart, E.M." "Elizabeth Morrison," Miguel whispered. "I remember the funeral. The senator was inconsolable. You think he ordered this?" The priest was quiet for a long moment, studying the sleeping child. "Power corrupts, but grief destroys. If Senator Morrison believed his daughter died with his wife, and now discovers she lived," he shook his head. "Some men cannot bear to lose what they've already mourned." Jake felt the pieces clicking together. Morrison's political enemies would love to use a living heir against him. Better to let the world believe she was dead than risk that vulnerability. "She needs a name," Miguel said suddenly. "A new identity, a chance at life." Jake looked down at the baby, who had wrapped her tiny fingers around his thumb. Sarah had always wanted children. They'd tried for years, lost 2 before birth, and finally accepted that God had other plans. But maybe this was his plan all along. Not the child they'd prayed for, but the child who needed them. "Hope," Jake said quietly. "Her name is Hope." Miguel smiled, the first genuine warmth Jake had seen in months. Hope Thornton has a fine ring to it. As if responding to her new name, the baby opened her eyes and looked directly at Jake. This time, when she spoke, it wasn't the desperate cry of an abandoned child. It was the contented murmur of a daughter recognizing her father. "Papa," she whispered. Jake's eyes burned, but not from smoke this time. For the first time since Sarah died, he felt something other than emptiness in his chest. This child had given him purpose, transformed him from a man waiting to die into a father willing to fight. But outside, dust clouds approached on the horizon. Their sanctuary wouldn't hold forever. The confrontation came at sunset, painting the mission walls blood red as 5 riders approached across the desert floor. Jake stood in the chapel doorway, Hope sleeping peacefully in his arms, while Father Miguel waited beside him, rosary in hand. The lead rider wore Senator Morrison's colors now. No more pretense about being lawmen. Jake recognized the type. Hired killers dressed in political authority. Men who'd murder a child and call it patriotic duty. "Last chance, Thornton," the man called. "Hand over the Morrison girl and ride away with your life." Jake stepped into the dying light, his voice carrying across the sacred ground. "Her name is Hope Thornton, and she's not going anywhere. You're harboring a kidnapped child. I'm protecting an orphaned baby from the men who tried to murder her." Jake's words rang with conviction. "Elizabeth Morrison died 3 months ago, just like the papers said. This is Hope, my adopted daughter." The killers exchanged uncertain glances. They had come expecting to collect a political loose end, not face down a father defending his child on holy ground. Father Miguel stepped forward, his aged voice carrying surprising authority. "I performed the adoption ceremony myself. The child is legally Jake Thornton's daughter, under territorial law and God's witness." It was a lie, but delivered with such conviction that even Jake almost believed it. The lead rider's hand moved toward his gun. "Senator Morrison wants a proof. His bloodline is extinct. We're not leaving without the girl." "Then you're not leaving at all." The voice came from behind the riders. Marshal Tom Brady, Jake realized, along with 6 territorial deputies. Real lawmen this time, summoned by Miguel's nephew, who had ridden hard through the night. "Gentlemen, you're trespassing on federal territorial land while impersonating officers of the court." Brady's badge gleamed in the fading light. "I suggest you move along before I decide to make this official." The killers were outnumbered and outgunned, caught in their deception with no legal authority to fall back on. After a tense moment, they wheeled their horses around and disappeared into the gathering darkness, but Jake knew they'd be back. Men like Morrison didn't give up easily. That night, as Hope slept peacefully in the mission's small rectory, Marshal Brady pulled Jake aside. "This won't end here," he said quietly. "Morrison's got reach, influence. You'll need to disappear, start over somewhere he can't find you." Jake nodded. He'd already made peace with leaving everything behind. His land, his name, even Sarah's grave. Hope deserved a chance at life, and he'd give her that chance no matter the cost. 10 years later, a man named John Thompson Raw, in a successful ranch outside Cheyenne, Wyoming, with his daughter Hope, a spirited girl with blue eyes and an infectious laugh, who'd never known hunger or fear. She wore her mother's locket sometimes, the one with the mysterious portrait, but when people asked about it, she'd just smile and say it belonged to someone from a long time ago. Jake, John now, would watch her racing her pony across the pasture and remember that day in the desert when a sack shifted in the dirt and changed everything. She still called him Papa, with the same contentment she'd shown that first night in the mission, and every morning he thanked God for the gift of being her father. Some evenings, when the wind carried dust across the rangeland, Jake would scan the horizon out of old habit. But Senator Morrison had died of a heart attack 5 years earlier, taking his secrets to the grave, and his hired killers had long since moved on to other employers, other sins. Hope Thornton was safe, loved, and free, exactly as Jake had promised the frightened baby who'd whispered "Mama" in the desert and found herself a father instead. The past was buried as deep as the territorial records that listed her adoption, and the future stretched ahead like an open road under endless Wyoming sky. That's the end of today's story. If you found it interesting, leave a like and subscribe so you won't miss what's coming next.